Hello and good morning. Well, that is if you're on the West Coast, it's still kind of morning, but for me, I'm in Texas and it's in the afternoon. So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Flame, host of the Master Motivation Podcast, where I have the amazing opportunity to bring to you some amazing guests that are going to give us some motivation, inspiration, and education. And I'd like to introduce our guest today. This is Ruby Raze, who is a 15-year veteran of professional wrestling. Hailing from Ventura, California, she made her mark in wrestling by taking on men and women alike, being dubbed the equal opportunity ass kicker. Currently, she wrestles for an all women's TV show, taking her downtime in the ocean, bodyboarding, and working as a social media manager. Welcome to the Master Motivation Podcast, Ruby.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I am excited, and you just got out of the beach and you're doing some surfing today, and you're getting ready to go back. So thanks for taking time to be with me for the next little while. I've been excited for this show for a long time. Actually, we booked this probably last year, and here we are bringing it to the show today. So the first question I love to ask all of my guests is, what is your motivation between being that equal opportunity ass kicker in professional wrestling?
My motivation pretty much from the start was always to show that there could be amazing women's wrestling in Southern California and to be an inspiration for little girls out there. That's been my driving force ever since I can remember. It's just that whole pay it back from everything you saw when you were a kid.
Yeah, and so of course, like most of us that get involved in professional wrestling, we're wrestling fans growing up as kids. Um, who were some of your role models or people that you looked up to as a young girl when it came to professional wrestling?
Um, so I was a huge fan of Glow. Huge fan of Glow. The people I looked up to the most were like Hollywood, Vine, like the bad girls in professional wrestling. Love Colonel Nanuchka. Like, if you name it and they were a bad girl, I probably really liked them.
What drew you to the heels, right? What drew you to the bad girls?
They always seemed like they just had more fun. Like they got to do everything that was fun. Like I felt like the faces in professional wrestling were always the ones getting picked on and bullied. And yeah, nobody really wants to be picked on and bullied. But also, at least in Glow, yeah, they were picking on you, they were bullying you, this and that. But they always did it in a fun way. It was never like really malicious, really just mean. Like it was always in a fun
Hmm.
high school, like graveyard bully sort of way. And it looked fun. And they had great costumes. Their gear was amazing.
Now, when were you introduced to professional wrestling for the first time?
Probably watching Glow. And I was like an itty bitty. Like I was a tiny little thing watching Glow. And my brother was about 9 years older than me. And he was a freestyle wrestler. So he would always practice his wrestling moves on me. So I got to learn a lot about freestyle Greco-Roman style wrestling when I was small. Like he taught me a lot. Took my first German suplex on a bed and immediately hit my foot in the dresser, cried my head off, and don't do that anymore. But we did it again. But yeah, ever since I was tiny, like it's been there, and growing up, it's been there. It's from 19 years old watching, the Attitude Era and looking up to China and looking up to like all these women, and it always stayed there. It's been there like my entire life.
Right. And I have to ask, since you brought up Glow, obviously the Netflix series was pretty popular. What was your take on watching the show?
I loved watching the show, and since it's gone, I'll say this now. I was actually cast on season 4 of Glow on Netflix, and then they shut down for COVID.
Oh
So
man.
that would have been like ultimate childhood dream come, and then it gets canceled.
Oh
So
man. What a
um,
bummer.
it was a great show though. Like they did a lot of cool stuff. And I really was anxious to see where it was going to go. Like,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've got some other opportunities that you've taken advantage of that we'll talk about, a little bit later. You brought up people. You brought up China in the Attitude Era. Um, when, like, what year did you start watching Glow in wrestling? Like, what era would you say that you kind of really grew up with it?
With Glow,
Yeah, Glow, or just watching WWF or WWE at the time.
Glow was like I must have been like 5 or something. It was in the early 80s. And I remember specifically watching the very last episode of Glow, and I was like, well, what's going to happen? They're going to come back, right? They're going to come back. And it's like, because they left it on a cliffhanger. If you
Yeah.
watched it, it's like this thing of like, you could kind of tell things are winding down, and it's like David McLean and someone else walk away. They're like, this could have been the beginning of a beautiful friendship, and they walk away into the mist. I'm just like, no. But like when I was a kid too, WWF was still doing like those house shows where they would come to like your high schools. And I remember I was tiny, tiny, tiny. And my brother wanted to go to one. So I went with my brother and our dad. And that was like such a mind, like I only have clips of memories of it because I was so young when this happened. Right. But you just see all these big colors and these big characters and stuff like that. And I love that. So it's like I said, my earliest memories. And when I say that, I mean like 5.
Yeah.
Like, mhm,
Well, so I mean, in the 80s to the 90s to the early 2000s to now, I mean, obviously professional wrestling as a whole has totally evolved. And especially in the world of female wrestling and how women were portrayed in wrestling. I mean, I can remember like in the 80s, I think like Wendy Richter would be someone that I remembered as like kind of a high profile female wrestler. And I mean, and she was a wrestler, but
mhm,
then you got into the 90s and women became more valets, managers, the whole kind of TNA series, right? And then
mhm,
now here we are back again where, women's wrestling is highlighted probably more now than it ever has been. Um, Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, people like that, really, really well known and really, really good technical wrestlers, right? Not
mhm.
just for the screen. So, what were your thoughts growing up and how it was portrayed and how it evolved, how it's gone through the different phases? What are your thoughts on that?
So obviously, like when Glow was around, there was a lot of like attention to what you look like, your character, everything like that. Moving forward, you're right. I did go from like a spot where you had like Bull Nakano, like Alondra Blaze, and all of them, like showing up and showing off, and then the Attitude Era ish in the '90s when it became more of the look at me, like the puppies, like this and that, like that was I'm gonna say it was disheartening, but at the same time, there was a lot of good female wrestlings when they would let them wrestle. Because
Hmm.
you had people like China, who was like an intergender wrestler. You had people like Lita, where you had to be very sexy, but if you had the wrestling too, cool, you could get highlighted. That's awesome. When I came about into professional wrestling, I felt like there was still like the big struggle just to be a woman in the business. That being said, like Southern California, I always make the joke we have about 5 female wrestlers at any given point. Like, and that's what it was, back in the day. As far as portrayal on TV, like they had this whole, WWE had this whole thought of the woman's evolution, and they kind of executed on it a little bit. And at this point now where we are, I feel like there's so many great female wrestlers that are out there and putting out like really good matches and doing really great things. But for some reason, I feel like that attention's been drawn backwards again, where they don't necessarily want to highlight females as much as they do males. And I get it. I get that there's more males in business. They should have more airtime. But if you're only putting on one woman's match per TV show, you have 2 hours, 3 hours, only one woman's match. Like if you want to break it down, like do women only get 5 minutes compared to like everybody else gets the rest of the 55? I don't know. I try to think it about terms and ratio, like how many men, how many women, how many spots, how much time. But I feel like even though a lot of women are showing out and showing how great of wrestling they could do and we can be, it's still inherently a boys club.
Hmm.
And it's kind of staying a boys club. We're not, I feel like there needs to be more forward progression to give us bigger storylines as females and more airtime and just more time to actually show what we could do.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, coming from a martial arts background myself, there was always kind of this thing about, women training with men and the men fighting with the women. And, competition is one thing, totally, totally separate. When we have a martial arts tournament, there's going to be separate men's divisions, separate women's divisions, and usually there's an equal amount of both, really. Um, but I never really when I trained with a lot of very strong women and female martial artists, and I never really thought of it as different. We were just all martial artists, and we all trained together. We all did the same stuff. We had the same requirements for our black belts and all those things. But again, you're talking about kind of that ratio of time, and how many women are actually out there wrestling, and it's so many more men, and it's kind of a boys club. I mean, how have you navigated since you've started with wrestling? How have you navigated, just kind of dealing with all of that? And
Um,
really just getting along with everybody in the locker room, you know what I mean? Because, like, obviously, like, men and women in the same locker room, like, how does that work out?
yeah. Oddly, it works out oddly. I think, so navigating that as a female wrestler, I was very fortunate in the fact that the person that brought me into this business, Tyler Bateman, told me from the get-go that I'm gonna have to work 50% harder to get a tenth of the recognition than a guy will get. And I get it. He told me that I always have to be a wrestler, and then he's like, and then expect people to tell you that you're a good wrestler when you're not. That you always need to be harder because you're yourself and you make yourself a good wrestler because people will look at you and assume on your looks if you're a good or a bad wrestler, which that really sucks. And there's been times in professional wrestling where I came back and I asked someone that I respected, hey, what did you think about my match? And they would tell me something, or I'd say, hey, how did my spear look? And they're like, oh yeah, no, it looked great. And I looked at them, I was like, I didn't even do a spear. Like, thanks. I guess, it's hard. And the only thing I thought to do was I was done with just wrestling the same four girls over and over. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have the same match over and over. I didn't want to tell the same story over and over. So at Santino Brothers, my wrestling school, I actually was put in with men. And then I got sick of wrestling the same four men over and over because they're like, oh, give her the small guys, give her the small guys. So my pushback to try to make a mark was to ask for the big guys specifically. And I started with BC Killer, one of the biggest guys out there. You know, that's the only way. That's the only way I felt you could do it. You had to prove over and over. And it doesn't mean if you're taking an ass whooping in the ring, if you're doing crazy stuff, so long as you're safe and so long as you look good and so long as you're wrestling good too. You had to just push yourself as a female just to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize. I had to mute my mic for a second because I had some people coming in the house. But yeah, that's you brought up a lot of things, and I want to try to touch on each one of them. But really, I want to go back to, you brought up Santino Brothers, you brought up Tyler Bateman, and you brought up, like, breaking into the business. How did you even learn about Santino Brothers, and was that your very first school?
They were my very first school. So even before I was a manager, because I started in this business as a manager, I was a photographer for the business. I was going to art school, visual journalism. We had to have specialties, and I did sports and concert photography. And I wound up shooting for, what's the name of it? I'm gonna forget the name, but they were running out of Santa Paula, California, out of Casa de Mexicanos. So it was like Robbie Phoenix, Joey Chaos, A-Bone, Mike Rain, like a bunch of guys who we know from the business. And I went and I shot a lot of their shows, and people got to see me at a bunch of shows, just going around shooting photography. They loved my work. They started nagging me like, hey, you're a girl. You want to become a wrestler? Like, I'm like, no. Finally, I decided when I got put as a valet for Violence Unlimited, and I did managing for 5 years, I decided I want to actually train, not just train in the ring before we get to a show. So I looked up Santino Brothers. They were high on my list. Initially, Bateman didn't want me to go there because of the reputation Santino Brothers had back in the day, like you're going to go there, you're going to get your ass whooped. He's like, no, don't go there. But when it came time where I was applying to grad schools, I applied to USC, and Santino Brothers is like right there, like near USC. And I was like,
Right.
I guess I'm going to go there. And so I talked to one of the trainers, and I said, hey, this and that. I'm like, well, I want to ask you this about your school. If I go there as a female, you're going to treat me any different than the men. Like, I don't want a different treatment. And they guaranteed me they wouldn't. So
Right.
that sealed it.
So that's what sold it for you, is that they weren't going to treat you any different. They were just going to bring you in, break you in, and put you through the paces. So that I love when I get to learn more about people, on the podcast, because I didn't know that you did photography before, and that's really how you got involved in the business. And then you were a valet for 5 years before you even wrestled your first match. What were some of your experiences, starting out as the valet, and what are some good memories of that?
Oh, my very first time as a valet was for Violence Unlimited, which was Bateman, Funnybone, and Drago, who is now Simon Gotch. Um, and I knew that, when you get there, you listen, see if there's any spots for you. So as we're getting ready to go out to the ring, I looked around. I was like, so I don't have anything, right? Like, I'm good. And then one of the guys turned to me. He said, "Valets are meant to be seen, not heard," and walked away. I was like, oh, okay. All right. So that was like my very first memory being a valet, but probably the best memory I have being a valet or manager. I was actually a manager. I did more, I did a lot of the talking. I did a lot of this. At some given point, I gave up the low cut shirts and smart dresses, and I was wearing like a business suit with like a tie, a rhinestone tie, and everything. Like I upped my stuff. Was meeting Roland Alexander, who everybody knows APW, the garage. I met him at the garage, and he took a liking to me, and I was, starting to kind of train a little bit at the time. And the first thing, big conversation I had with Roland, he's like, "Hey," he's like, "I need to talk to you." I was like, "Oh, brother, what did I do wrong here?" And he's like, "I just want to tell you," and if you know Roland, this is very Roland. "When I saw you, I thought you weren't ish. You weren't nothing." He's like, "But then I saw you out there in front of everybody, and you got them to hate you, and you got them to call you names, and you got them to hate your guy." He's like, "I think you're one of the best corner persons I've ever seen." And
Nice.
so that was such a huge thing, because everybody, if you know older wrestling, Roland, oh my God, this is the Godfather. Like, so it was very nice that me and Roland, and I'm going to get sentimental because I know he passed. We actually accumulated a friendship. And when I was applying to grad school, when I was trying to find wrestling schools, he always sat down and gave me so much advice. And yeah, it was during midterms when I was at USC in grad school that he passed. And midterms be damned, I drove up there that weekend for his memorial show, and Russ, he told me he always wanted to see me in the APW ring, and the first time I got to be in the APW ring was for his memorial show.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay.
But
I
yeah,
mean,
but
you know,
these are
let,
go
let
ahead.
me let me just call this out. Here's what most people watching won't totally get, right? Is like, in professional wrestling, we develop these relationships with people that may be an uncommon relationship. It may be like, someone that you may not. I know that when I got involved, there's so many people that I probably wouldn't work with in my professional life, or I wouldn't meet, and how quickly and how easily these relationships. So when you watch shows like, we just watched about OVW on the network,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
you just kind of see these relationships, how they bond, and how the life of a wrestler. And so watching you get emotional over this and talking about like this show, like after he passed, like I can really understand that. But I don't think that everybody truly can. So I just think that it's kind of important to point that out. But this was important to you. So, and I mean, you missed your midterms to go do the show, right? So
yep.
finish your story and keep going from there.
But yeah, it was just you know, he was the first one that really invested in me and sat me down and taught me a whole lot, because I wasn't at a training school then. And he taught me so much, and he just sat there and he would talk to me for hours and hours. So that's when you talk about the highlights that you've done as a manager, or things that happy points, that was such a huge happy point, because it was even before I became a wrestler. It was,
Hmm.
you and I guess if I break it down, it's that, like you said, it's the relationships that you do have, the
Hmm.
relationship that you do make. And him, Jason Strife, who recently passed, there's a lot of people, and I think that's probably a highlight. And that'll, when you say going forward into professional wrestling, about being in the same locker room, there's a lot of guys out there that they'll be your friend, and it's like they're your friend. But it's those deep, meaningful connections that you actually have with people that do honestly just see you as a friend, as a person, as someone trying to get better, as someone trying to learn. Those are the
Right.
relationships that are like really the chef's kiss because they just want to see you get better.
Right. Well, and going into it, like for me, like going into professional wrestling was always it was a childhood dream. Like I grew up watching it. I just want to get involved somehow, some way. In my early 20s, I had a potential opportunity that I passed up, and I didn't even start until I was 38. But at 38 years old, coming into a bunch of young kids, really, I developed some of the most amazing relationships myself. One of who, Danny Devine, that one of my best
Mhm.
friends, not just in the business, because everybody calls each other brother, right? Like, oh, brother this, brother that. But
Yeah.
like truly to know that this person is there, like through the good times, through the bad times, is got your back when you got bad stuff going on in your life. You had a situation where you and you had someone that believed in you, right? That's another thing that I think is super important in any area of our life, is that when you have someone that sits you down and say, yeah, I think you got something there, right? And that
Mhm.
gives you a sense of confidence, not just in the ring, because that confidence that we take away from being in the ring to our professional lives and to our careers and to our families even, that's a
Mhm.
huge boost of confidence to have someone say, I believe in you, and I think you got something. So I think that's really cool that we got to tell that part of the story there. Now you decided to go and train at Santino Brothers, who I've had Joey Chaos on the show, I've had Ray Rosas on the show, I want to get Mongol on the show, I've had you here now on the show, I want to get Bateman on the show. And I never trained at Centino's, right? But I know a lot of the guys and girls that come through the MPW locker room, and I've gotten to meet them over the time, and absolutely 100%, Santino Brothers has that. There's just that mentality, right? And has that
Mhm.
reputation. I mean, even Gino Rivera was on the show, and we talked at length about his first class and training, and just the brutality of it all. I mean, there's no real other way to explain it. I mean, because again, we're talking about professional wrestling. Most people will be like, "Oh yeah, it's fake." All right, cool. You can say that all day long, but you go through 1 day of training with us, and I call bullshit right away, because you couldn't hang, if you had to go through that. So, talk to me about your first couple training sessions and what that was like, and how they did treat you just like everybody else.
So, because I was coming off not really on the indies, but already working in the business, and I had matches at that given point. I had my very first singles match before I was ever fully trained. I had matches as a manager. I had tag matches alongside Bateman. So because I was coming off the business to train, which sounds really weird, um, Joey said, "Okay, well, I want you to start with privates." So I started with privates with him, with it was him, it was his wife, Jezebel, and there was one other person in there. I'm forgetting their name. But it was in private classes, and I essentially did those, and I really liked those because I felt like I got one-on-one attention with Joey. I mean, it's private classes.
Hmm.
So in that time, oh man, I wish I could say that he would take it easy on us, but he never did because you start training class and it's like, all right, get your squats, get your cardio, get your rolls, get your push-ups. And then I remember one time, oh my God. So we must have done 200 squats, you break it up 50, couple deep breaths, another 50, couple deep breaths, another 50. And remember when we got to 200, we're like, 200. And then Joey goes, 50 more for the wrestling gods. We're like, 50
Uh,
more. We're like, all right, 250, 50 more for Mongol. Like, you'd always do that stuff. It's
yeah,
always so gnarly, but I would have to, like, the way I looked at it was like, it's almost like a boot camp that you have to get through this part to get to the fun part. So you have to make
right.
sure you do your squats, have your cardio, do your rolls, this and that. And Joey, I think his intention for doing that and having me go to privates was to literally test my skill level because he saw my matches. But like, what's your skill level now? So in those private classes, I got to wrestle Joey Chaos one-on-one a lot. Like, and he
Hmm.
would do things in the matches that I've never done in a match. Like, he would be like this, and I'm just like, go with the flow, cool. Like, I guess this is
Right.
what's happening. There's a couple of Ray was there one time helping out with privates, and there's like this video of me and Ray Rosas, and literally Ray has me tied up and has my hair being pulled back, and I'm just like, ah. but it was great. And the great thing about that is I did those for like 3 months. And at that given point, I guess promoters were messaging Joey if I could take bookings with them.
Mhm.
And finally, Joey's like, yeah, like go take bookings. He's like, you know, you've been here 3 months. He said this to me. He's like, honestly, he's like, you knew it all already. He's like, I just cleaned up your footwork and I'm going to send you out into the world. And now at this point, go to any class at Santino Brothers. You want to go to beginners, go to beginners. You want to go to intermediates, go to lucha. You want to go to advanced. He's like, I had all you could eat. It was an all you could eat buffet to go to training at Santino. So I'd go for beginners. I'd go for luchas. I mean, whatever I could go to right now while I'm doing my college grad work, going to it. And so I felt that was exponential, like, because to my professional wrestling, because you cleaned me up and then I was given the world and told that I could learn whatever I want now. So having that and being able to do all that was just, it was really good. It expedited my learning process. And then once I was given a lot of name wrestlers off the bat really quick as far as women go here in Southern California. So I was wrestling people like Candice LeRae, like Lufisto, or, you know, these girls that have a name that made their mark rating professional wrestling. And I'm wrestling them like 1 month in, 2 months in, 3 months in. So everything was a learning curve and it all came really quick.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's a pretty amazing experience to have, so much private training. Because sometimes you get caught up in a group class or beginner class, and you don't really get you get the reps, but you don't really get the work that you really need, some of that detail work. Because people, just like martial arts, again, going back to my martial arts experience and how it tied in with professional wrestling, it was so very close in so many ways, because it was the details that really mattered. Like you said, footwork and ring awareness, and just being able to listen and be able to move on the fly, just real easy. And then being in front of a crowd and being able to read the crowd and kind of read the room a little bit. And that's tough for a lot of newer wrestlers, especially in your first few matches. I mean, you're kind of like, you call the match, and you're getting ready, and I know for me it was like, okay,
Yeah.
all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'd be counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you watch the match back and you're like, oh, that looks super mechanic. Like there's no
Yeah.
no real energy. So my question now is, how did you find your you were already a valet and a manager, so you kind of understood how to work the crowd already. But what do you think was your strong suit, and what made you so effective connecting with the crowd? Because that's a super important part of what we do.
Yeah. I think my strong suit was from the get go. So I feel this is my strong suit, but it's my downfall too, right? From the get go, everybody was telling me, hey, you're bigger. Like, don't do that. Hey, stop letting
Mhm.
small girls push you around. Hey, this, they, and like, it doesn't register with me because when I look at you in the ring, I see you as my equal. I don't know what size you are, bigger, taller, smaller, it doesn't matter. I see you as my equal.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I had people like Bad Dude Tito, Rico Dynamite, and people like, they're like, stop it, stop. Why are you doing all these things? And then like someone like literally did a photo, like there's a photo of me and someone, they're like, look at you in the ring. Look at her in the ring. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I get it now. Like that whole like size dynamics and
Mhm.
um, not being pushed over so easily. Um, and I think not a lot of girls then stood up for what their size was. They would just go with the flow,
Right.
and it was one of the things that Lufisto also helped teach me is like make everything count. Don't do things just to do things arbitrarily. Like, if Lufisto is only going to bump me once in this match, why should you as a smaller girl bump me like 5 or 6 times? You know? But sorry. And to the crowd aspect, I feel like that the relatability to me in the crowd at first, in my opinion, was like, oh my God, look at this chick. This is the badass chick. She's coming out here. She's wearing all black. She has the mask on. She has this and that. She has, and I don't have we call it in my family, the Hernandez stance. Like we have this stance where it's like, when we walk, like, you're not going to mess with us. When we walk around, we have that. So I bring that out when I came out. But I feel like I didn't actually connect with the crowd till a little bit later, where I found my niche being the equal opportunity ass kicker. And instead of just fighting solely females, now I'm fighting dudes. And now I'm giving that connection to the women in the crowd who's like, oh my God, I wanted to deck that guy at the bar. Well, I'm that girl decking the guy at the bar now. Oh my
Right.
God, yeah, I do this and that. And then the guys see it too, and their connection was like, oh dang, she fights back, bro, like that sort of thing. It wasn't until
Yeah.
I tapped into that I feel that I actually connected really with the crowd.
Yeah. Well, and so we started to touch on this a little bit earlier, and now you're talking about it again. Intergender wrestling, right? I mean, some people are into it. Some people are not. Obviously, this is a big thing for you, and part of your whole niche and part of your whole character. Because yeah, I mean, how many times do you have a woman that would just love to just beat the shit out of some dude, right? And it's like you get to be that person, and every woman in this that's sitting in the seats is like, yeah. So how do you deal with some of the wrestlers that have a hard time with this? Because I'm willing to bet that there's a ton of dudes out there that are like, yeah, I'm not jobbing to her, not gonna happen.
Yep.
What's the deal?
So I've actually heard that before. Like I had a match with this big guy, and I heard him say, "There's literally no reason I should ever be at risk for losing to her in the ring."
Hmm.
And in my head, I was like, "You'd be surprised. Like there are so many things that a woman can do to a man to take him down, and it's
Hmm.
not necessarily just the kick to the junk that you could do. Anybody could fall for a sucker punch right here. You
Sure.
know, anybody could get domed in the back of the head. Like it's so my take on that is always when it comes to stuff like that, I'll be like, okay, tell me what you want to do then. What do you want to do? We have this match. You don't want to do it. You don't want to do this, that. You just want to beat the crap out of me this whole time? Cool. I'll take it. You know what's going to suck? You couldn't lay me down and I keep getting back up for 10 minutes. So you want to play nice or do you want to look weak?
Right. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, right? It's kind of silly, right? It's kind of silly because what we do is already predetermined, right? I mean, Booker's choice. What the Booker says is what we got to do. So
Mhm,
let's try to tell a good story and have some fun with it, right? I mean, we are acting. We're playing a role. We're playing a part, and we're playing a story in a show that potentially is leading to the next show. And so, there's a lot of storytelling. And I think that's what people forget about with pro wrestling is learning how to be part of the story and how to tell the story and being an artist, right? Because yeah, I mean, if this was the UFC and we're gonna have a full on match, that's going to be a different story, right? I mean,
mhm,
that's just going to be a different story. That's why there are different divisions in competition. But you know, on a show, I mean, I've seen some amazing matches. Across the board. Intergender matches, female matches, small guys versus. I mean, you see it all the time. Small guys, little small. I mean, Eli Everfly's small, right? And how many times
mhm,
has he had a good match with a big dude? And
exactly.
you got to learn how to tell the story of why this is able to happen. And if you're
Mhm,
good at what you do, then it doesn't look bad. There's a purpose behind it. So yeah, I've always kind of heard the rumblings in the background, and um, it just a topic that I thought that was worth discussing. So I know you've been through this a lot. Now you brought up Tyler Bateman quite a bit. So he helped you kind of break in. Really, is that how it happened?
Yeah, so I met Taylor Bateman in Oklahoma 2006,
Mm,
2006. And I'm actually the reason why he wound up in California for more wrestling. And he was having his trouble getting his foot in the door here in Southern California, and I introduced him to someone we both know, Bo Cooper.
mm,
Bo Cooper is the one that actually got him on his first show to break California wrestling. And from there, Tyler started, doing IWL shows, Epic War shows, a bunch of, of the indie spots here. And I was always at the matches with him, and I'd be doing either photography or I'm just there watching. Eventually, Gary Yap asked me if I would want to be a valet because he was putting together Violence Unlimited, Drago, Funny Bone,
mm,
Bateman. And I'm like, I've never trained or anything. Like, I don't know. He's like, that's okay. You don't have to. He's like, show up, be dressed, show up, walk the guys out, do if they need you to do anything, walk back.
mm-hmm.
Cool. After that, when Violence Unlimited broke up, I stayed on as Tyler Bateman's manager And he actually, I feel like me and him grew a lot together within the business and as people. And our relationship became like a lot of just wrestling focused. We'd watch stuff together. We'd dissect how people talk. We'd watch charismatic leaders. We watch Jim Jones. We watch Charles Manson. We watch Southern Baptist people, like, to understand how to talk to people, to
Mm-hmm.
make things make sense, how to elicit emotions. Like, we deep dove so much into wrestling psychology and about matches. And like, I'd learned something and I'd be like, hey, this, and he'd come back with like, well, this, and now let me tell you this. And he's from the Mid-South. Let me show you the Mid-South ways, now let me tell you this. And like, intergender wrestling, like this, like, as much as he taught me a lot, I felt like, because we're growing together and I was a psychology major at the time, so I'd help bring in like, and here's how we talk to people, and here's how things happen, like here's how to elicit emotion, here's what not to do, like here's, so he's essential to who I am as a professional wrestler, as much as Joey Chaos is, if not maybe a little bit more, because we deep dove into everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've met Tyler many times at the MPW arena, and but I don't know him, very very closely. But what I do know is that he's highly respected and spoken of very highly from everyone that I talk to, and everybody loves to work with him. And he's no young chicken either, right? I mean, he's getting up there in age too, and he's still active and still wrestling, which I think is pretty damn cool, right? So yeah, that's
Yep.
awesome. I'm glad we got to talk about him a little bit. So let's talk about where professional wrestling has led you since then, and what you're doing now. You've actually kind of got some, you have a dual role with the company you're working for now.
Yeah. So professional wrestling, as it were, 2019, I actually um, got a call from David McLean, telling me about his company and how they were looking for someone and they wanted this role to fill. And he's like, your name's been brought up several times. I, looked you up, I had my eye on you, whatever. And then as he's talking to me, like, and I kid you not, if you know David, this is like a 2-hour long conversation. Because about what he does and what he wants and how things go. And let me tell you the history.
Hmm.
But at the end of the conversation, he's like, all right, then I'll send you over the contract and we'll get you into the training facility. And I'm like, what just happened? Like, what's what? Okay.
Right.
No, and so I show up to the WoW training facility, and I don't think I was supposed to be put in a tag team originally. And when I showed up, and they're like, "Hey, get in the ring, move around," and I don't think they understood that I was actually a professional wrestler, and this is what I do. I've been doing it, like, I do what I do, and I do what I do well. And so literally after they saw me in the ring, they're like, "Hold on, tell me about yourself." So talked about myself, and they're like, "All right, we were going to put you in a tag team, but no, you're going to be a singles wrestler now." 2019 tapings happen. I have a great time. I'm up for like the main title contention. I'm wrestling people like Tessa Blanchard, Thunder Rosa's there. All these great professional wrestlers are there. And then COVID happens, goes away. Now they return again with this new deal with the network now, and we're in syndication, and we're global. We're this, that, and I'm back at WoW again. And it's been amazing. It's been hard, very amazing. And I went from singles back in title contention again to a tag team now with me and Heidi Howitzer on the show known as Wrecking Ball. And through that too, somehow like people are like, oh, she makes really good Instagram posts. She does well. I had to do a takeover. I did well on the takeover. Like, oh, what's your background? I was like, oh, I went to USC. What'd you go for? Applied psychology, also, communication, stuff like that. Oh, we need someone to do our social media. What are you doing? I have time. So it's really
Right.
cool, like at this point, that everything in my life that I ever did, I felt like was for a reason. And I always held on to professional wrestling, even when I wasn't making a ton of money, even when I could hardly pay my bills, even when professional wrestling is my only income and I'm struggling. I'm struggling. I couldn't find a job with a master's. I couldn't find a job. I'm overqualified. I couldn't find anything. But all I had was professional wrestling. And I knew throughout my life, I still need to hold on to professional wrestling. Everybody's telling me to quit. My mom's telling me to quit. My mom's like,
Hmm.
find a job. You have a degree, this and that. And I was like, I feel like I have to hold on to it. I feel like there's something.
Right.
And that something turned out to be, okay, now you're on this TV show and now you have a job with the company too. Like everything I ever wanted actually came from professional wrestling. I have a job. I get paid. I get to be on TV. I get to wrestle. I get to do these glow type things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's like full circle. Like I said, there's pictures of me walking out to the ring, and there's glow girls taking pictures of me walking out to the ring. That is so cool. And then I
Yeah.
have these glow girls like from back in the day messaging me, and they're sending me my photos, and I'm just like, like there's, oh,
Wild, right?
it's wild. Life is wild.
It's super cool though. I mean, you've lived that life of the the independent wrestler. You talked about, there was a time in your life where you were wrestling to make money and you weren't making much. And so, people watch shows like they watch, wrestlers that was just about, OVW, and you watch Heels, and you
Mhm.
watched the movie a few years back with oh, now I'm dropping his name, but
Mickey Rourke.
Mickey Rourke, yes, the wrestler, right? And so
Mm.
you watch these movies about, the outside world watching professional wrestling goes, why? Like, why? Like, people don't get it. And you kept saying how you felt like you had to hold on to it, right? And sometimes it's you holding on to professional wrestling, and sometimes it's professional wrestling holding on to you, right? It's the other way around. So
Yep.
talk to us about that life, about being kind of pulled back in, and being bound to it so tightly.
Yeah, I'm always a big proponent of going where the universe takes you. So this might sound weird, but hear me out. If I feel like I am being drawn somewhere, I need to go there. If I woke up this morning and I said, I need to go to Hawaii, apparently I need to go to Hawaii, and I'll figure out a way to go, either if not today, tomorrow, or sometime next week. Thing with professional wrestling, when I was a manager, before I became a wrestler, I had this big feeling of unrest that I'm supposed to be doing something else, something more.
Hmm.
When I went to train, that stopped. So now I'm feeling okay. Now this was the unrest. I needed to be doing this. And as professional wrestling went on for me, I had a great job as a marketing analyst. I was making a lot of money. And then all of a sudden I get this whole 3 weeks, like Ohio, here, there, Juggalo Championship. And I was like, I need to go do that.
Hmm.
I quit my job to go do that. I quit my job to go do this. And I understand there's consequences. So now, I made the money, but now I'm not making a ton of money anymore. Now I'm living off of professional wrestling. And I lived off of professional wrestling wages for 5 years, making everything that I made from professional wrestling went to pay everything. And then it, coming down to past COVID, I'm fast forward now, past COVID, wrestling came back weird in Southern California. I'm sure you know. There isn't a whole lot of wrestling that was going on past COVID. And I'm like, now I'm really not making money. Like, now I'm upset. Now I'm not having a good time. Now, I'm having these issues within wrestling, within women's wrestling. And I'm like, I broke down one night here in San Diego, and I was like, these are all the things I have with professional wrestling right now. I feel like I'm done. I feel like I'm done. And you know what? It's fine. I can be done. Let me just have my one last match against so and so. And literally, I kid you not, 1 week later, David McClain called me again.
Hmm.
I was just like, oh, well, guess I'm going back to WoW. Like, I was just like, I was ready to quit the indies, and I was just ready to be done. And then that's that thing. David calls me, and all of a sudden I'm pulled back in again. But this time I'm pulled back in, and now I have everything I ever wanted from professional wrestling. I have a job. I'm on TV. I get to do these things. So
Hmm.
that's that whole, like, the universe will put you where you need to be, and you just need to at least be quiet enough sometimes to hear where you're supposed to go.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's actually a really good bit of advice for people that are watching that have nothing to do with professional wrestling, never going to have anything, but just to kind of hear that message of, like, hey, if you're quiet enough for long enough just to listen to that voice, right? It's the
Mhm.
universe does talk to you. That is a fact. So, in 15 years as an independent wrestler, prior to hooking up with WoW and doing this now, I mean, did you have the goals and aspirations to make it big in WCW, WWE. Was that ever the plan? Was that ever the goal?
Nope,
Never.
not at all, not at all. And it's very simple. And another reason why I felt like I was okay to quit. My goal was to show that good women's wrestling could come out of Southern California.
Hmm.
That was it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's all I wanted. And I felt like at some given point, I helped produce that with the girls that we had here, helping the younger girls and me. You know, getting to work with the older girls and me, and then getting to work with people that are willing to go out there and give it their all, like Delilah do.
Hmm.
That will, that we showed that hey, we had this feud in Southern California, and people in New York are talking about it.
Yeah. That's cool.
I did it. So at that point, that's why I was like, it's okay to be done. When I was ready to be done, it's okay. I did what I said. I don't need to be here anymore. But
Right. Well, I've had, several wrestlers on the show, and I ask this question often, and so many of them are like, yeah, like that's the dream, that's the goal, like that's what I want to do, and very few have said what you just said, is that you just kind of wanted to leave a mark, you wanted to leave a legacy, you wanted to add something. I think this is what's important in martial arts for me, is leaving that legacy of the black belts that I teach, that will be able to continue to teach the next generation. And I think that you've definitely already left that mark for several women that are wrestling now and working their way up. But now you're just doing it at a whole new level. I mean, you're that person in the ring, that little girl is sitting in the chair, just like you were when you were like 5 years old, going,
mhm,
if she can do it, I can do it. And I mean, that's, we need that. I mean, kids need that. Um, Professional wrestling was always something that, like, kids think they're superheroes, and I think that's cool. Like, I look at someone like John Cena, who's, he's an amazing talent, right? But
mhm,
what about the fact that this guy goes and does like the most make-a-wish of anybody ever, right? And
mhm,
then you look at the Rock. I mean, who doesn't know who he is, number one, but now look at what he's done with his fame and fortune, and what he does to give back. And maybe it's not all financial, maybe it's just giving hope, maybe it's just giving hope to someone, or giving planting the seed for someone else to live their dream, right? I mean,
yeah,
uh I just think that that's a cool part of professional wrestling, and no matter what level you're on, at the
mhm,
lowest, smallest indie show with 10 people watching, or you're in an arena with 10,000 people watching, like, it brings some hope. So just a couple last minute questions, and I put this up here. I don't know if you saw this, but Charles Villarubia said, not a question, but just wanted to say that he misses seeing you at the Santino show. So what's up to him? And thanks for watching. But my last few questions as we wrap up here. What is one of the biggest failures that you've had in your life, that has, usually they say that the setback is the setup for the comeback, right? So what's your biggest failure that has propelled you forward?
um, I don't know if I'd call it a failure, but in 2017, I got diagnosed with cancer and had to have emergency surgery. Right, emergency surgery, remove tumors, this and stuff like that. And I will never say that I came back better, quicker, stronger. Like it wasn't like that. But
Hmm.
what I came back was when I came back, it was a new outlook on life.
Yeah, for sure.
To know that something like that could happen out of nowhere, and to go into surgery and not know what's going to happen, to have that realization that your life could be taken with you in a blink of an eye, or something so tragic could happen in the blink of an eye. And that was really eye opening, to just live
Yeah.
my life, and stop caring, to get out, to go do things, to go see things, to go travel, to have experiences, good and bad. Just live it all, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I mean, awesome that the perspective has changed, that your outlook completely changed. I'm happy. Again, I never even knew that, and thank you for being vulnerable enough to just share it with everybody, and maybe people didn't know, but that's that
No one knew.
that's that's amazing to come back from that. um Thank God, right? Praise God for that. What is your greatest success that you are most proud of?
I gave my dad a couple $1,000 towards his new truck, and it was money that I made from professional wrestling.
Yeah. Hey,
That
that's
was
pretty
so
cool.
cool. Like that was my highlight, to know that what I'm doing now was able to pay my dad, help my dad make a payment for something, when my dad was always like, when I'm short on money as a professional wrestler, he's like, "Hey, let me slide you a hundo," here and there. To be
Right,
able to do
right.
that for my dad was so cool.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Very cool. Well, listen, I've had a great time just having this chat with you, and getting to know the woman behind who Ruby Raze is, and who you are in the ring and on the camera. I mean, you've been very vulnerable, and I appreciate that. I've really enjoyed this time. So thanks for being on the show. Do you have any advice for those listeners watching, whether it's that little girl that watches you in the ring, or it's just one of those guys that doesn't want to do the job and work with you in the ring? I mean, anything that you want to finish with?
It may be bad, it may be good, but you're always exactly where you're supposed to be.
Nice. Nice. That's a hard pill to swallow, right? I mean, sometimes, we hear this, and when you really sit and think about it, you're like, "Hmm, it's good advice. Good advice." Well, hey, thank you for being on the show. Hang out for a minute. I'll be right back. Just reminding everybody to go to YouTube and subscribe to Master Motivation Podcast. Check out some of the amazing guests that we've had in the past. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it all over social media. And let's have you back on the show, and let's do a female wrestlers roundtable. So we'll get it.
Yeah, that'd be
Who,
cool.
who would you recommend if you had to pick two other women to be on the show with you? Who would you pick?
Delilah Doom, for one, definitely. And probably let's go with Heidi Howitzer. She actually has a really great mind and a different take than I have, and yeah.
All right, all right. We'll have to make that happen, and we'll make some plans to make it happen. So, thanks again for being on the show. Everybody, go out and have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you on the next episode of Master Motivation Podcast. Thank you, Ruby Race.